Hello, welcome to Everyday Ordinary, Extraordinary Men. I'm Martina and I'm here with Christina, and we are your podcast hosts. We are deep divers and avid students of life and powerful facilitators for healing. I am a life coach specializing in parent and women empowerment, and I'm also a sound healer.
And I'm Christina. I'm a massage therapist, intuitive healer who loves to blend energy work with my body work to provide customized holistic services for my clients. We both enjoy incorporating crystals, essential oils, angelic Reiki, and intuitive guidance into our work.
So let me tell you a little bit about the context. Most humans have a lot of preconceived notions and stereotypes about gender. For example, men are tough and silent and forceful, and women are chatty, manipulative, and emotional. And in doing that, we put people in a box and often forget to see beyond those labels. And if someone is not fitting the mold, we might call them a tomboy or a sissy. And those and similar labels often cause discord. They're not a compliment usually. So what will the world look like where we go beyond our preconceived notions and understand that we are much more than our gender, that we humans are strong and soft and gentle and deep and powerful and tough and fierce and open, and that qualities are not specific to a gender, that we all have all qualities available to express? What will the world look like where we all are free to be who we choose to be and express all of our emotions? When we allow ourselves to express the so-called masculine and feminine qualities within ourselves, we set ourselves free. When we allow others to do the same, when we accept all of them, we create synergy, peace, and harmony. And today we're here with Robert. We're so excited to be here with you, Robert. Robert, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Robert Wu, and I'm retired. Retired for about 5 years now, and I have a lot of hobbies that keep me busy. I'm a father of four children. One that's 33. I'm a boy that's 33. He's a man now. Two girls that are 21 and 20, and another son, youngest son at 18. So with that, we have a busy household. My oldest son is in Hong Kong, but my three children are still here, two in college and one is in high school. And that's how I know Martina is through my oldest daughter actually went with her daughter at Portledge in school, in high school. So as a retiree, I find a lot of time to volunteer. So I do a lot of volunteer work, and I also play pickleball, which is why I'm wearing this hat. I just came from practice, so but I play pickleball and I teach pickleball. And the reason why I teach is because I can't play as much as I would like to, because as you get older, there are some mobility issues. So in order to stay active, I teach more than I play. But that is one of the hobbies I have. I also do a lot of volunteer work. On a couple of different boards. I'm on a board for the Suffolk County Boy Scouts. So because my son is also a Boy Scout, so I volunteer for the Boy Scouts. I volunteer at Portledge for the Parent Teachers Association. I'm one of the vice presidents of the upper school for the DEI committee, working with diversity, inclusion, and equity for the school at Portledge. So I have a lot of activities, but I also am a father and a husband. So my wife is also teaches at Portledge. So I keep busy by going back and forth to Portledge because my son is still there at school. So all the athletic activities I get involved in, I go to the plays, I go to the different parent teacher association activities. So I'm very active with that. So even though I'm retired, I think I'm actually more busy than I was before when I wasn't retired. So my background is varied. I went to engineering school. I was an engineer at first, got my MBA, went to marketing, did marketing, uh, left marketing, semi-retired, if you will, to go traveling around the world. My goal was to travel, I guess, about 6 months. I ended up traveling for 8 years, believe it or not, because I ran out of money after 6 months, but I had this travel bug. So in order for me to continue traveling, I became a tour guide. So I was a tour guide in Europe, Eastern Europe, Soviet Union when it was Soviet Union, China, Asia, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. So I did that for ended up doing it for 8 years. Came back, got married. Actually, this is my second marriage. I got married first time back in the late '80s, and had to find a job to support myself after I traveled. So I opened up a travel agency. After opening up a travel agency, it specialized in China because I'm bilingual. So what I did was I focused on travel to China. But back in '88, '89, I don't know if you're familiar with history, but political situation in China was not that great. There was the Tiananmen Square incident,
Mhm.
and I lost the business after that. So I had to reinvent myself after I lost my travel business. I ended up going into food, believe it or not. I did uh, uh, food service. I ended up working for PepsiCo, which owned Taco Bell. I was in Taco Bell, which is kind of interesting because when I worked for Taco Bell, I told my parents I was going to Taco Bell. I said, we spent all this money sending you engineering school, and my father was a waiter and a bartender all his life, working in restaurants. And now you're going to work in restaurants? How can you do that? So I said, Mom, that is more than that. I'm a manager. I work in marketing, so it's different. I said, well, prove us wrong. So I made good money, but I only did that for 3 years because after 3 years, I was disillusioned because of how companies will run. I was more. I think I had more in values in life, and I wanted a company that valued its employees more. So I read this article in New Yorker magazine about this guy from Brooklyn who had a tough life with his parents because they didn't have health insurance. So he says, when I own a company, I'm going to have a company that pays for health insurance for all their employees. I said, that is the kind of company I want to join. So when I left Pepsi to join this small coffee company from this guy from Brooklyn, my friend said, "You're crazy. Who's going to pay $5 for a cup of coffee?" This is back in the early '90s, and you're leaving this great company called Pepsi, Taco Bell, which is doing really good and growing. You got all this stock, and you're leaving them. I said, "Well, because I believe there's more to a job than just making money, but you got to work for a company that has the values you believe in." So when I joined them back in '94, they had I guess about 75 stores. And when I left them 10 years later, they had over 10,000 stores. So when you talk about coffee companies, you can imagine which company this was because I did very well and I was able to retire by the time 10 years later. And that's another story I'll go into, but uh, talk about some of the tragedies or unfortunate things that happened in life. But I left them back in '04 to start a family. My second wife started a family, and I had 3 children from that because my goal was to have a successful career as a full-time dad. So I became a full-time dad for 6 years with my wife. We were full-time parents for 6 years. And then when I went back to work, it was for different companies and to do something I really loved. And that was, I worked for Dale Carnegie teaching public speaking and leadership skills. And then after that, I was called in to go back to food again. I worked for Carvel, which is an ice cream company, and worked for them for, I guess, about 9 years until I was laid off because of the pandemic. And I said, well, enough is enough. I'm not going to work anymore. I'll start with Social Security. I have some savings, my retirement savings. My wife is still working, but I'll focus more on my family, go back to my family again. And I just spent all that time, last 5 years, with my children and with my wife, and in retirement. So that's kind of what a quick synopsis of where I've been since I got my first job as an engineer. So
Wow, that is just so much, right? And it's a lifetime, and it is a lifetime,
yeah,
right?
it is. Yeah,
What I so appreciate about you is that you were always there with your kids. Like there was not even an event at school where you were not at,
yeah,
and like your participation and involvement in their lives and your willingness to just step into that for me was always so beautiful. Apart from I really appreciate who you are, and you know it's just I appreciate your family. I love your wife, and and so I just really want to thank you for being here. Now,
thank you.
Robert, if we really knew you, what would we know?
You would say that I'm a good father. I'm a good brother, good husband, and I like to help people. I actually something else I do is I mentor students or people that are early in their careers. I like to help people. I like to give back to others so that they can have better lives and they can have more richer lives in their experience, not only in their working lives, but as people. So I'm a giving person, and again, it's I do a lot of volunteerism. When I volunteered back when I was single, I volunteered I was a fencing coach. You might see fencing in the background. I was a fencing coach for 15 years voluntarily at my university when I went to school and high school. And I was also a big brother because I love children, and I took care of two fatherless boys for about 5 years. So I'm always volunteering, doing stuff. But I'm a giving person and like to give back to others and share my life experiences with those who are have a lot of years to go. I'm not I'm 70 years old, but I still have a lot more to go. But the 70 years I've lived, I have a lot of experience I want to share with others. So that's what I do.
It's so beautiful. Like what I hear is the theme of your life is service, right? Like you want to be in
Yes.
service of your community and
Yeah.
make everyone's life better. It's just
Yeah.
so beautiful. And the other thing too is like the other theme I hear through all your stuff is you're constantly reinventing yourself, but following your passions. Like it's
Yeah.
always driven by what you love and what you're passionate about. And
Yeah.
that's such a beautiful inspiration, I think, for a lot of people who are stuck in doing things that aren't making them happy. So that's really
And that's what I share with I mentor at least 4 or 5 different college students right now, and some that are new in their careers, and I share with them what I did, and then they said, "I can't believe you did that because how can you had no money?" Well, it didn't matter if you had. I would find ways to do it because when I had a job as I was a marketing manager, I was going up because most of my contemporaries were 4 or 5 years older than me. And what I found after 2 years in marketing was that a lot of them were getting anxiety attacks, heart attacks, and stressed out. And I said, I don't think I want that for the rest of my life. So I gave up a high paying, good job, back in the early 80s to go traveling. And people say, you're not, you've been promoted so many times so quickly, and you're giving this up to go traveling? What are you, crazy? So what I found was that, yeah, I am crazy because I was able to make some money. I sold my house, I sold my cars, I used that money, but I ran out of money. So I reinvented myself by continuing that passion for traveling because I mentioned about cultures. I want to learn about more about cultures around the world. And to do that, I was able to be a tour guide. But there were struggles in that too, because people said I wasn't going to succeed because when you're in Europe, you had to know 3 or 4 different languages. I only knew two, Chinese and English. But I was able to convince the travel companies I worked for that it was more about languages. It was more about knowing the people that you're traveling with and knowing what the needs were and sharing your knowledge and experiences in your travels with them. So that's what I was able to do as a tour guide. So
really cool.
The other thing that I also loved when you were sharing about your like who you are, right? That you left your job for something that you felt was more important and more precious than just the money, right? And it's just so beautiful to hear that because we often, like particularly in this country, I find it's all about your status, and your status is so tied
right.
to how much you
Yeah.
have, not who you are, but how
Yeah.
much you have, right? And the status is more like who are you in the ranking, not who are you
Right.
as a human being, and
Right.
that like it speaks so loudly for you that you were willing to give that up for to work for someone who like had that vision, and just follow that. That was just really, really beautiful.
And I was lucky.
Such an expression
I
of who
was
you
lucky.
are.
Yeah, because people said, how were you able to join Starbucks when we started? I said, because when I joined it, nobody thought about what it was. They said, you're crazy to pay $5 for a cup of coffee. And when I heard that the founder, Howard Schultz, who started this company, he actually bought Starbucks and started the way it was. He paid part-time employees full health insurance benefits. Nobody did that. And what people didn't realize, because they said after he did this for a couple of years, they said, you're going to fail because no company will survive because health benefits are very expensive. And for you to pay even your part-time employees health benefits, you're crazy. You're going to lose money. People didn't realize, and it's now become a Harvard business school case, was that if you do that, your employees will stay with you. And when you're in the business of fast food or hospitality, employees last no more than 6 to 8 months. They just leave. But when you have health benefits, they stay. And an average lifespan of an employee at Starbucks is about 4 to 5 years. That's unheard of. So when you don't
Yeah.
have the turnover, the company will make more money because you have happy employees. They come back, they make the company more money. Company grows, customers come back, and you'll keep on growing. You have people that start as baristas are now vice presidents of the company because they went up the line because they're so happy with what they did. So I was able to see that, I guess. And there is luck involved, but there's fate. But I also believe in things happen for a reason. And I joined Starbucks after I got a divorce my first time, and I was in a very bad time in my life, very dark period. So I said something's got to be better, and it happened that I was able to do that because again, it's right place, the right time. Because my ex-wife happened to she was a flight attendant with United, and she ended up taking my son and moving back to Hong Kong. And what happened was when I worked with Starbucks, it just happened. My boss said, "We're opening up in Taiwan, which is very close to Hong Kong. Uh, I know it's going to be hardship for you because all your family is here in New York, but what do you think about going to Taiwan?" I said, "Let me think about it. I'm in." Because what happened was that she didn't realize that my wife and my son, ex-wife and my son, were in Hong Kong. If I live in Taiwan, it's only a half an hour trip away there. So that was a good point in my life. So things happen for a reason. One more story, I think I'll tell you, because another turning point in my life. First when I was walking to go traveling to come back to work for Taco Bell and then Starbucks was an experience I had at Starbucks when this is back in 2003, and I had like 5 different countries I worked for then: Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand. I was doing a 2-week trip, so I was away. My oldest daughter, my oldest child from my second marriage, Catherine, who went to school with Serena, was born in Hong Kong back in '03. And what happened? I came back from a 2-week business trip, and I'd gotten sick. So I was in the hospital for like 4 days. I had pneumonia, so I came back. I ended up growing a beard, so I had facial hair and beard. When I came back after 2 weeks to see my wife is late at night coming back from a trip from Philippines to hug my daughter and kiss my wife. My daughter didn't recognize me, so she started crying. My wife started crying, and I started crying. I said, "You know what? I can't do this anymore. I mean, I lost my first marriage because I did a lot of traveling. My ex-wife, did a lot of traveling. I don't want this to happen again." So what I did, I told Louisa, I said, "You know what? I'm going to go back to my boss tomorrow, and I'm going to ask him to transfer me back to the U.S. because I can't do this travel anymore. Because I treasured this marriage. I want to have more children. I want to be close to my family." So I think that's a good decision. I said, This will happen in 6 months." So I was very confident of that because they treasured me as an employee. So I went back the next day to my boss and I said, I had a bad experience with my family yesterday because they missed me and I want to spend more time. I don't want to do this traveling anymore." He says, "Well, you know what? You can't do that. We're expanding in China and we want you to head up the group in China. So we can't do that. So you have a decision to make. I'm not going to recommend you go back in the US. You either stay and get promoted in China and you do a lot more traveling, or you have to look for something else." So I said to him, "That's an easy decision. That's not hard to make." So I next day came back, I gave him a resignation letter. So I'm out of here in 2 months. So I resigned in 2 months and I left. And then after I didn't regret that at all because I came back and because Starbucks stock was doing very well, I was able to save it. I lasted for 6 years with the money that I made, bought a house here on Long Island, and was a full-time dad with my wife, full-time parents for my second 3 children for the next 6 years. And it was great because I could spend all my time with them, go to all the museum in the city because we lived on Long Island, and go traveling. I was their tour guide around the U.S. because that's what we did. So I had 3 children from the second marriage and didn't start working until 6 years later when they were developed. They had a foundation because I had this thing where, parents would say, "How come your kids are so smart?" It's not smart. It's because we get in the right foundation. And they said, "Well, you're tiger parents because you don't have TV at home. You don't have computer." I said, "Because we don't need it because we're parents and we'll give them that foundation." So it was funny because when they were little, when they're 2 or 3 years old, I would read to them to put them to bed. When they were 5, 4, 5, or 6, they would read to me and put me to bed. So it got to the point where it was like paying itself off. So 6 years later, I get a job. I go back to work, and my wife ended up getting a job at Portland. So she full time. So both of us start working. But the kids have their foundation. So they read. They're well read. They did very well in school. And another thing was I didn't give them cell phones until they're in high school because I felt that was going to be too much, the whole social media. Now it's more impossible to do that, but give them the right foundation so they mature individuals, and give them things like scouting and other activities that we do on the outside, and go to museums, that they have that foundation so they know how to not only learn, but learn how to learn and be adults, and be leaders in their own right. So that's something I contributed to my kids, and that's why I said I'm a giving person. But I set my kids up for success by giving foundation, and now they're on their own, and they're happy, and they have good friend groups, and I think I contributed to that, and that's all I want to do as a father, as a full-time dad, and now I'm retired. I'm still doing stuff with my kids and my wife.
It's so beautiful because it's, and it's challenging, right? My children didn't
Yeah,
get cell phones until they went to high school. We
yeah,
didn't have a TV when they were little.
yeah, yeah,
And it could be like, see, I've had conversations where people said that's abusive. I'm like,
yeah, yeah.
we just do
That's right.
different stuff, right?
Yeah,
We just
yeah,
do different stuff. And there is, I find there is like, they're very connected to each other.
yeah,
They would just go outside and play. They
yeah,
would, just be with each other, right? And we would play games, and we would, yeah. They're reading to the children. Sometimes they would read to me, and most of the time, or when I would read to them, they would correct me, and I was like, okay,
yeah,
it's your
yeah,
turn, right?
I think that's what we do have something in common, because you talked about being at all your children's activities. Whenever I went there, I know Louisa was teaching, but when you and Andreas was always there. I said, how can he do that? But he made his time for his job, and I know even with the activities, all the athletic activities, and everything that you and your kids were involved in, he was always there. I
Yeah,
saw him. I said, he must have a great job, but he had a difficult job because he had to travel too.
yeah,
But I saw him there more often than any other male parent. Because most of the males are working, the females are not as much. But
yeah,
when they saw me, they said, "How can you do that?" Because, well, that's because I'm retired. I can do it. But even when I was working, I found a job that allowed me to stay at home, didn't have to
yeah.
travel, because I made that contract with the company I worked with. I said, I will not travel overnight. I want to have dinner with my family every night. So when you make it a point with those companies, I think they appreciate it. So
And that's beautiful because you made that choice, right?
yes,
You were so clear on your priorities.
yes,
This is really what matters the most, right? It's the
yeah,
most precious. So yeah.
yes.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So, Robert, what would you say your superpower is?
Superpower. That is a very good question. I've had that. I've heard that before, but I'm not a super person. I don't have superpowers. I have, maybe they're, as your title of this podcast is, maybe the extraordinarily ordinary.
Yeah.
Okay, because what I do is, like I said, I'm good with people, and that's why I did well when I worked at Dale Carnegie, because I know how to connect with people. I'm great at networking. And it's funny because when I was at Dale Carnegie, they made me sales manager. I said, but I hate sales. I don't like to go out and knock on doors. I don't like to sell something to people that they might not need. But this was something that everybody does need, but it wasn't cheap. But what I found out was that we're all salespeople. When we talk about ourselves, we're selling. When we try to convince somebody to do something, go play pickleball, you're selling. You're selling yourself. You're selling what you believe in. So once I found out I had the ability to do that, I was able to use my networking skills, people connection skills, to grow relationships. I'm sure you've heard the term for never burn bridges. I know, don't burn bridges, because no matter how bad the situation is, that person may come back to your life in the future, and you might need them. Okay, so what I do is I build bridges with everyone I meet, even those that I don't get along with well, but there's a reason why we meet people and have relationships with people. So if I were to have a superpower, it's one that is, I have a better EQ than an IQ. which is emotional quotient versus intelligence quotient. I think the IQ goes to my wife and the EQ goes to me. And when I share out with my children, I said, we don't know what I said, you know it, because the reason why you get along with so many different groups of people is because you had that EQ that I shared with you. You know, we learn about you talk about the divisiveness in the world today, the political divide, if you have, in the US. And if they only learn one thing from Dale Carnegie, I would teach them. I said, learn to agree to disagree. If you can do that, you're much better off. People don't do it. They just stand their ground and you stop it. No, I'm right or you're wrong, whatever, and they won't go because you'll never agree. And there's a reason why there are two parties, and we know that. The reason why always two sides to a story, and never are both sides totally right. You have to agree to disagree so we can move on and move forward. And I tell that to whoever I meet, whoever I mentor. I said, they're always good and bad to both sides. You were never right. You know, I may have gotten divorced the first time, but I was not 100%. There were things that I did wrong, but I have to admit to it. I have to move on and trying to not to make the same mistakes the second time again. And I didn't. Okay, but there are a lot of times I have to pull back. There are things as men, as male, you tend to be strong-willed, and you hold your ground, and especially Asian men, and that's why there are a lot of when you talk about different cultures, whether it be China, Korea, Japan, men tend to have this. It's even more chauvinistic than here in the U.S., which is why a lot of Asian women prefer to marry Western men because they said they're more kind, they're more gentle. Uh, Asian men tend to be very, no, you stay at home, you do the cooking, you do the what, but I go out and make the money. And because of that, it creates a lot of issues. But when I was born and raised here, and I saw my father be that way too. I said, I will not be that way. So there are times when I have to bite my lip and tell my wife, you're right, I'm wrong. And to a point where it should not be patronizing, but it should be a point, I understand where you're coming from and let's move on. It's never, we have arguments by the time we said we're here for our children too. So we want to make sure they see the best parts of us. If we argue, we argue, on the side so they don't see it. But they've seen us argue before, but they know again, we find a solution, we find a middle ground and we work it out. I tell that to everyone. And as a networker, as somebody that works in relationships, I said that is so important to be able to agree to disagree, move on, and move forward so we can all have better lives.
Absolutely. And it's important to fight in front of your kids in a healthy way. Because if you don't want them to think that you're perfect and nothing ever doesn't go, so it's important to fight in front of your kids in a healthy way. So
but they let us know too. Dad, stop it. Mom, stop it. Leave Dad alone. Or Dad, leave Mama. And they say it, okay, because we do the same thing to them.
Yeah.
And it's healthy. It's constructive. So because we know we're not perfect, we know that we have to get better. And what better way than to have your children tell you the same thing? Especially nowadays when there are a lot of sensitivities with everything, whether it be with gender, with political views, with economic status, is very, very important that they have their own views and they make their own decisions. So
yeah, it truly is like that. Agree to disagree and just take a deep breath and take a step back, and it's like and your kids definitely tell you. Definitely tell you.
Well, the other thing is that because I'm from a generation, I'm from the boomer generation, 50s, 60s, baby boomers, and I have children. I have a son that's millennial. The others are Gen Zs, and they have a lot of sensitivities. If I'm with, like, say, if I'm playing pickleball and I'm a group of boomers, we swear, we say, we make fun of things, gender specific things, and we laugh at each other. If my children hear me saying those things in front of them, they'll say, Dad, you can't say that. You can't say homosexual. You have to say gay. Or you have to accept, queer. Or what you say those things. I get so when I'm with a different group of friends, my age group, I'll say things differently. When my children are there are things that I say. It's interesting because I couldn't imagine listening to the type of music that they listen to, 30 years ago, when they listen to these rap songs and they're explicit. And I hear him swearing on the songs. I said, how can you listen to that? He said, Dad, relax. It's nothing. It's that we won't speak up, but it's what we listen to. So like different generations have different sensitivities, but I respect them. They respect me, and I respect where they're at because there's an evolution here as the different generations move on, whether it be boomers, Gen X's, Gen Y, now even next generation. So I tell my children, wait till the next generation comes along, and you'll be saying, "How did you get this way? What's this about AI?" I mean, that's what the next generation is doing right now. So
Yeah, it's beautiful because it seems they keep you on your toes, learning and
oh
growing,
yes,
and
yeah,
and that's just precious. And you are willing to step into that. That's even more precious, right? You're
yeah,
not, as you said, you're not the patriarch who says this is how it's done, right? You keep that space open for them to just, be who they are, which again, I so appreciate about you. So what was your biggest lesson? For example, what was your biggest challenge, or what made you who you are today, or what took most courage, or when did you stand up for something that mattered to you?
for me, the biggest thing was to be able to accept uh, not as a defeat, but things that happen that are not positive, whether it be my divorce, whether being laid off from a job, whether being told that you can't get what you want in your job because this is what the company wants. Um, to me, be able to accept that and say, there's a reason why this is happening. There were times of very dark times. I'll show you. It was a dark time when I was in Philadelphia, opened up the first group of stores for Starbucks in Philadelphia. And this is when I first got divorced and was separated from my ex-wife and my son at that time. I had to go back every weekend to go see them. But here I was in a rented apartment that the company paid for, was on the top floor, 16 floors. And I looked out the window. I said, this would be very easy to end. It was very dark. And I just just don't even think that. So what I did, I was very depressed. I told my boss that. I said, I can't take this traveling back and forth from Philadelphia to New York back and forth because, I have to see my son. I was very close. I have to, and he was only 2 years old. I have to see him. So he was able to get me a transfer back to New York City. That's when I opened up the stores in New York because and I was able to see him every weekend. So I took that, made it a positive, and said, even though I'm not married, my wife left me for different reasons, whether it be she wanted to travel, didn't want to have a bigger, more of a family, whatever. There was different reasons. And I was traveling myself a lot, and that added to the division of separation of our marriage. But I said, I got to move on from this. So I moved back to New York City, and I spent a lot of time with my son. I bought a car just for him. He loved Batman. Okay, so I had to get a black car that was the Batmobile. I would drive him around. So at 2 years old, Dad's got a Batmobile. So that's what I did for him. And then the second part of that was when my wife decided to move back to Hong Kong because that's where she's from. I allowed her to do that. First of all, in joint custody, you're allowed to have a say, whether or not, she can move back with my son because she had physical custody, but I had joint custody, so I had a say. So I said, well, if you go by Hong Kong, I see him every weekend now in New York to Philadelphia. I see him on the weekends because I live close by. He says, well, since I work for United, you can have free tickets to go to Hong Kong. So I will go to Hong Kong, every 3 months to go see him. But you would pay for the ticket. There were employee tickets. But it just happened again, right place, right time. I allowed it because I wanted him to be close to his mother too. Even though I was working a lot, I said something's going to happen. And in 6 months, it did happen. When I got that transfer to Taiwan, which is very close to Hong Kong, you're traveling between Hong Kong and Taiwan. It's like taking the Amtrak from New York to Boston or New York to DC. So every weekend I would go see him. And by that time, I was opening up stores in China and Hong Kong, so I would be traveling for free. So I would make business trips to go see him. And then 2 years later, they said, I know you're away from your family in New York, but we're thinking about opening up headquarters in Hong Kong. Would you mind going there? Of course, I'll go there. So, and I would see my son every weekend, which is great. So these are things that happen for a reason. Um, the thing with, when I was laid off from Carvel, this is 3 years ago, 4 years ago, because of the pandemic. There's the reason why that happened, because my health wasn't that good. I've got diabetes, and if I continued working, I think it would have gotten worse. But the whole thing with pickleball came up because my oldest son, said, "Why don't you try this?" I said, "What do you do? Do you eat pickles? Do you throw pickles? Wait, that's a silly name for a game." So I said, "Well, let me try it." So in 2 weeks, I got addicted. But he lives in Astoria, and I had to travel every 2 or 3 days to go see him to play. I said, I can't do it. It's just ridiculous. I'm retired now. I don't have a job, but I can't do that traveling. So let me see what I can do here in Ronkonkoma, close by in Suffolk. So what I did was I found a court that they painted lines on. They converted to a pickleball court, and I found people playing that because it got popular. It was getting popular during pandemic. So I started a group with 8 people. This was 2.5 years ago, and now that group is almost 1,000 people, to a point where I'm wearing this hat because they made me ambassador, because I'm growing the sport like crazy here, all because I love the sport. They made me an instructor, and I'm only instructor because I have some athletic abilities I can pick up quickly. But now I'm teaching. My goals are to teach senior citizens. I teach special needs kids. I teach wheelchair. So they're spreading the news. I'm teaching at Portland now too, to the lower school, because these are the things that they can learn to help not only foster uh, healthy sports, but also teamwork, sportsmanship, and all that stuff. So I'm giving back to that. So everything that's happened to me, whether it be health, whether it be job related, whether it be family related, happened for a reason. I look at everything positive, and that's what I share with the people I mentor. That's what I share with family members. I share with my children. Even if it's bad, is the reason why it happened. And you'll meet people along the way that will help you, because it always gets better. Okay.
You're so humble, Robert. So, you didn't just have some athletic ability, you coached fencing in the past. You have coaching experience.
Yeah, well, I had that, but teaching experience too. But at the same time, I lost that. I lost the athletic when I tore my ACL, so I couldn't do that anymore. So even teaching, I was limited in my ability, but I had enough assistants that could help me. So and it's all in your mind, your brain. So when I taught public speaking or taught leadership, it was all from my experiences, and it's how I gave back. When I was a coach in college, another experience I had some fencers that were prima donnas, and they would show up late. They would always show up late. There is one fencer I had. It was junior, and he was one of our best fencers. And he kept on showing late. So I'm taking you off. You're not starting. You're not fencing. You're not competing this week because you're late to practice. He said, "How can you do that?" I said, "I'm doing it. Either you come on time or you don't make the starting team." So he gives me a call. This is email now, because we didn't have email back in the 70s, 80s when I was coach. This is 2007 or 8. He's now a successful lawyer in California. And he says, "Coach Bob, I don't know if you remember me, but I was one of your fencers, and you taught me great life lessons." Well, first of all, I do remember your name, but I don't know what I did. He said, "Well, you cut me from the team because it was late." He says, "I'm running a successful law firm now, and I have assistants, law clerks, they're late, and I take them off cases. It's because of you." So I think when I heard that, I said, well, it made it worthwhile as a volunteer coach teaching students or giving life lessons. I think I paid it forward, and they bring it back in their own lives. So whatever you do, you will influence them. No matter how slight you think that action is, it will be a good result, is what happened.
Well, one of the things I hear in what you're saying is you never know
Yeah.
what you put out there, how it's gonna land, how it's gonna come up. All you get to do is trust that it will land and it will make a difference, and it's exactly what they needed, right? It's so beautiful. It really is. It's so powerful. Just that thought, right? It's like, who would have thought that, I don't know how many years later, what is it, 30 years later, 40 years later?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
right? And thanks you for what he did back then. Yeah.
It's interesting because when I was a coach, I was a coach in college fencing, I was about 26, 27. Okay. And he was in college, so he was 18 or 19. So I was only 8 or 9 years older than him, not that much older. And now if I'm 70, he's got to be 60, So the difference is it's not there. I mean, it's interesting because when they mature, they realize that because they'll always call me coach. I went back last weekend for alumni meet, and they called me coach, even though they're in their 60s or in their 50s, because I was their coach. But they always have, just like when you look at your parents, they'll always be a parent, no matter how old you are. They'll always be parents, and they'll be, you know, the authority figure in your life. So
Like your children are always your babies.
yeah, always be on bed. And I look at these pictures as, why did you have to grow up? You know, I wish you were still little. I wish I could still cuddle you. You know, now you're gonna have to cuddle me because you know I have mobility issues, and you have to carry me around. You know, so.
So Robert, you're an active guy, you play pickleball, you're coaching, you do a lot of stuff. What do you do to recharge your batteries? What fills you up? What's
Well, the same things that I do
mhm.
always charge my batteries. I mean, I spend time, you know, have dinner with my kids when they're home. I tell Jameson, my younger one, you know, you may have baseball practice or basketball practice, but let's have dinner at home. So, and my wife cooks. We all take turns cooking. So, having those conversations with them, learn about what they do, and hearing about how I can help them helps recharge my batteries. Playing pickleball recharges my battery. When I go out there, I played this morning. I gave lessons this morning. And, you know, I may feel at the end of the day, because I have diabetes, I have neuropathy with the feet, I have neuropathy with the fingers, I have spinal stenosis, which it's almost like sciatica, so I have pain. I'm living in pain, but when I go play, your adrenaline flows, and I just feel alive again. So it really recharges my batteries when I play and when I teach. Now, after I teach, after I play, then I start feeling pain again. But the joy I get from doing that and coaching people and helping people, not only my children, my family, but students that have just graduated, helps recharge it, because it just gives me is a meaning to life, and there's a reason why I'm here, to help others and to share the last 70 years of lessons I've had, that they can become contributing citizens. Because that's what I said to my children. I said, the main reason I'm here is not only I'm your dad and I love you, I love my wife, but I'm here to make sure that when I'm gone, I don't want to be morbid about this, but when I'm gone, you're contributing, you're doing the same thing that I've done for others. So you're giving back, you're contributing forward. Is I have so many examples of that. When I coached uh, fencing in high school for Guilford in Connecticut. When I lived there, I was traveling between Guilford and Hoboken in New Jersey to coach university fencing, but I also taught high school. I was, what, 22 at that time, 23, because I just graduated. I found this team. Again, it was another human interest story where the dad uh, started a fencing team in his school because his son got injured, had a spine injury, and couldn't do contact sports. So the doctor said, "Why don't you try something like fencing?" So he said, so he started fencing. He didn't know anything about it. He wrote it was a human interest article in the newspaper. I read it. I said, "Boy, they need a coach. So I'll help him because I just graduated. I have the ability. I can teach them." So I taught them, and then after the second year, they won the state championships because I was able to teach them some things that they didn't know. But what's great is that I went back about 2 years ago. They had a reunion, and then three of those students now are head coaches of three high schools in Connecticut. So and they when they saw me, "Oh, Coach Bob is back," I said, "Yeah, I'm only 5 or 6 years older than you, but I was your coach, and you learned from me." So I go back and I see them all the time, and they're almost retired now, but they have led successful lives, and I contributed to part of that. So
And
It's
that
that's
so
was the
so,
thing.
beautiful to see
Yeah,
those ripples, right?
yeah,
yeah,
To see
that's
those
yeah,
so
ripples.
gratifying. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
yeah, that's so beautiful. So if you had a magic wand and you could give people any quality, like any quality, what would it be and why?
To be mentors and to be able to give advice and to share your experiences so that those people can be better people and contribute to society, because that's what I've been doing, and I would try to give them that ability that I have, build their EQ up. There are some people that don't have the emotional quotient. They get angry, they shut down, they don't agree to disagree, and they just said, "I'm always right. I can't take it anymore." Just have that ability to share experiences. Yeah, I learned from that, and to be able to connect the dots. To say, "Yeah, whatever what happened to me, back in China, I could apply to the situation. Because whenever I talk to a student, there are a couple of undergrads over at Stevens where I went that I'm mentoring right now, and is, well, Robert, how can we, what have you done to help you get jobs? Whatever. And I just connect with people. When you talk about getting jobs, even it's not about what you know. You can be the smartest, but people like that go to Ivy Leagues, you can be smart and you won't get in. It's who you know and how you connect. So if you can connect with people that you can tell stories about, they'll get you in. Could be jobs. And here's one more story I'll tell you. I got so many stories. We can go on for hours. I know we don't have hours, but when I was in engineering, I said, this is fun and all that, but I want to do stuff that makes money for the company. So the company I worked for was Cheese Roll Ponds, which makes health and beauty aid products. Some of the products you've heard of, Q-tips, Vaseline intensive care lotions, Vaseline petroleum jelly, Q-Tex, all this stuff that they make, health and beauty aids. So I said, I want to be in marketing because that's where not only money is, but I think exposure for that. So in engineering, so I just happened that the vice president of engineering, I was in manufacturing then, happened to go to Stevens, where I went. And I was also a volunteer. I was on the board of trustees, honorary board of trustees for the school as a new graduate. And he said, I really admire what you do. I really admire that you volunteered to help as a trustee, even as a new graduate, but also writing stories in the alumni logs. So he said, I'm an alumni too. I didn't know that. He says, by the way, I was class of 76. He was class of 55 or something. He says, let me know what you want to do and maybe I can help you. So I said, well, I'm getting my MBA now. And he said, oh, where you got? University of Haven, company's paying for it. He said, oh, I happen to be on the board of trustees at University of New Haven. So I'm gonna when I give you your diploma, when you graduate, tell me what you want to do. He says, I want to go to marketing. I said, Robert, that's almost impossible. People don't go into a top consumer products company like Cheese Roll Ponds, Procter and Gamble, Unilever. He's going to become an engineer or just get an MBA from an average school. You have to go to Harvard, Yale, MIT, Sloan School of Business, all these top MBA schools in order to get that job. But I know somebody. He said, what do you know? I have my friend who's the vice president of marketing happens to be my golfing buddy. So I can set up a lunch with him, and then you can talk to him. But the rest of you, I can't influence. I can just introduce him to you, but I can't influence. So I had a lunch with both of them, sit down and talk. And he goes, I really admire what you want to do. But he said the same thing George is, nobody goes into marketing from engineering or if you don't go to top 5 business school. He says, but I admire what you do. And believe it or not, I used to be an engineer. So he went to Cooper Union. He went from engineering into advertising. Now he's the vice president of marketing. He says, I can make a new position for you. You can be assistant to assistant of assistant. But once you get it, the rest is up to you. So I was able to do it. I got promoted a couple of times. I became a marketing manager because I knew the right people. Not because of how smart I was, but I connected with the right people because of what I did. So again, like I said before, you don't have to be the smartest person, but if you know the right people and they admire what you do, and that's what connection, when I taught at Dale Carnegie, it's find the things that you connect people with. So when I tell students, if you're looking for a job, okay, what are you interested in? If you go have an interview, you notice that the guy has a picture of his kids playing soccer in the background, talk about soccer. And if you do that, you build a connection. They'll remember you for that. The things that I've gotten jobs with, not only through fencing, but through engineering or even through pickleball now, the connections I made, unbelievable. Because pickleball is so popular now, you make connections just by talking to people. And I think what I'm trying to share with you now, not only talk about magic wand or superpowers, is I hope whoever watches this program, this podcast, can use some of the examples I had to make the connections so they can be more successful.
Brilliant.
Okay.
I actually was thinking whether we could, and that's totally up to you, if we can let people who are interested in hearing more about you from you directly, if we could lead them.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
And I'm on LinkedIn, so if you want to get on LinkedIn, it's my name on LinkedIn. So
Very
So,
good. Thank you. I was just
you're
like,
welcome.
as I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh, there's so much wisdom and so much wealth is the word that comes. Not wealth in money, but just wealth in you that is just magical.
Life experience, I
Yeah.
think.
Yes.
And the thing is, everybody has it. They just have to realize that they have it and know how to share it. So,
Yeah. So
And I also love that it's all about connection, right? It's all
Yep.
about connecting with people. It's all, and you know, computers cannot do that. You know, phones cannot do that. You know, it's just like, it's all about connecting with people.
even AI cannot do that.
Yeah.
It can get you to a certain point, but there are some human elements that unless you are there and you provide that input, that wisdom, it's not going to, because AI does not have that wisdom. We
Yeah.
all have different experiences. So
yeah, absolutely. So Robert, what is the legacy you want to leave? What do you want people to remember about you?
I try to be the best dad, the best husband, and best friend I could be, and best mentor to others I could be. And hopefully, whatever they've learned from me, that they will do the same for others.
Brilliant. I'm just so Robert, my dad was very much like you. My dad was a Girl Scout leader in my church. He had coached the softball team. My parents were like baptism instructors. They
Yeah,
were
yeah,
just
yeah.
all about being of service and giving back. And my dad's like greatest accomplishment was when he watched his children do volunteer work. Like for him,
Well,
that was what made him the proudest. It wasn't our jobs. It was that watching us give back in our communities was what he was most proudest of. And so I think people take away how important giving back and being of service is from our chat today. I think that'd be really, really cool.
and my daughter is doing the same thing. Right now, my son is now starting pickleball in Hong Kong, where he is. He's sharing that. My youngest son just got his Eagle Scout rank in Boy Scouts, and he's the president of his class, so he's been able to share that stuff, and he's volunteering, help with the green team. I said, that's what you do. And I said, why you how he got to be Eagle is because I don't know if you're familiar with scouting, but they have an Eagle project, a huge project they have to do in order to finally make
Yep.
that rank. And in order to do that, you have to raise money. You can't use your own money. So he raised money because he knew he played pickleball with me and my friends. Most of them retired, so he asked for donations for. So they know donated about $2,000 for his project because he played pickleball and they knew him, and they have grandchildren that were also Eagle Scouts. So I said that connection makes us. I said you will do the same, not only for your kids but for your community. So volunteer, go into different organizations in college, and when you graduate, do stuff that will help community because those connections you have will end up paying you back, whether you realize it or not. Whether you want it or not, they're gonna pay you back. So, and I didn't do any of those activities for want or need of saying, well, it's gonna pay me back in the future. It just happened, and that's what you do. And when you give love, you'll get love. That's what it comes down to.
So beautifully said. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So Robert, thank you so much for being here with us today. It was truly a pleasure to have you here. Thank you everyone for listening today. If you loved this, please leave us a review. Please share with your friends. And if you want to know more about us and Robert, you can check out our notes below or check out our LinkedIn profiles in the notes. Please remember, you are extraordinary and you rock. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Bye-bye.